I'm joined today by two very special guests, Rachel Oates of the YouTube channel, appropriately named Rachel Oates, and Stephen Woodford of the YouTube channel Rationality Rules. We just got back from the Faithless Forum conference, which was a fantastic gathering of people here in the United States. It's a conference, the first ever conference organized entirely by atheist YouTubers. The entire event, I'm a little bit biased, but I would have to say it was a blast.
It was fantastic.
Objectively so.
One of the most fun times I've ever had at any kind of conference or convention.
There were just so many amazing different people there, like from different backgrounds, without different experiences. Just meeting everyone was incredible.
Seriously amazing. Whole community I didn't know existed, and to be part of it is incredible.
Definitely worth coming from England.
Yeah.
So both of you guys flew out here all the way from the United Kingdom. And I wanted to kind of get a little bit of your perspective because if I'm not mistaken, it's your first times here in the United States, right?
I've been to New York before, but this is my first time anywhere else, like outside a big city like that.
First time in the Bible Belt.
Yes.
For me, it's first time, and I thought I'd go, balls deep immediately. Straight to Texas. Yep.
Now, both of you guys make a lot of videos on your channels about atheism, and you talk about why Christianity's wrong and why Islam is wrong and all the other religions. And I wanted to get an impression as to how you see the United States being different than the UK. Like, what are some of the major differences? And the first thing that I wanted to touch on was kind of this idea of the default position.
Yeah, so this was like the biggest shock for me and Steve, I think, and it's something we've discussed.
Yeah.
It's like in the UK, you don't really talk about religion that much. And just for me and my friends and like literally everyone I know, you just assume someone's an atheist until they tell you otherwise. And then if they say, oh, I'm Christian, I'm Muslim, I'm this, you're like, okay, cool, moving on.
And even then, if they're Christian, you can assume that they're liberally Christian.
Not necessarily practicing.
England is full of cafeteria Christianity. And I mean really vague stuff. You're getting towards Jordan Peterson territory, essentially.
So not like the young earth creationist evolution denial.
No, you're not getting that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's a vast difference, and that's the first thing that shocked me.
I think my mum is a very good example of what like a lot of religious people are in the UK, and she's like, she doesn't go to church, doesn't pray, none of that, but she still thinks there's a God somewhere. Maybe he maybe made us, he's maybe watching over us, but she doesn't actively do anything. She doesn't read a Bible. She doesn't practice any kind of religion.
It's like a source of comfort.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so she'd never use that religion to try and like justify any harmful views or anything like that.
And don't get us wrong, like there is areas where there's some big religiosity, but you find nothing as quite as conservative or right. Really, you can find epochs, but it's really rare. Put it that way, and that's a big difference.
So it's here in the U.S., especially in the South, but also, I mean, the whole United States, you'll see churches everywhere. You'll see a block that might have 5 different churches along like one street, and they'll be across the street from each other. It's pretty insane just in terms of sheer quantity.
We have buildings like that, but they're pubs.
That's and we pray by drinking.
Gotta worship the Lord of the Booze.
So much.
I also noticed that whenever I've gone to the UK, there's not really any kind of advertising for religions. So you might see the churches, the cathedrals, and if they are advertised, it's a tourist attraction.
Yeah.
It's, hey, we have this cool building here that is 500 years old and it's a historical monument, and it's not something that people go to worship.
Yeah. And if they are like pushing the services or whatever, it'll be like like an A5 leaflet, like just put up on a little notice board outside the church. It'll be something like that. Whereas here, the billboards, oh my God, like all it's like, Jesus loves you, you'll burn in hell if you don't do this. It's all like, pray this and do this. It's everywhere, literally everywhere.
Yeah,
it's
is
insane.
So much more divisive. Yeah. It's really peculiar. Yeah.
What are the craziest ones that you've seen, Steve?
Right, so I'm jet lagged, so it's hard to remember anything at this point. And last night I was really busy on the Atheist Experience.
What's that, Steve?
I don't know if I've told you about this. Yeah, Atheist Experience. Thomas will plug it below. So the weirdest ones I've seen, I can't actually recall, but what I can recall is that there's been many. And the thing that I found really odd is that we went to a service station and there was just crosses everywhere. Like, I felt like I left and I had been throat fucked by Jesus. Like, seriously everywhere, absolutely everywhere. That's probably the odd. That is real odd.
Yeah. The interesting thing as well is that, like, in the UK, like, you'll walk down a street, and if there are, like, religious buildings, you know, there'll be, like, a church here, a mosque here, a temple here, all Christianity. All the advertising is for Christianity.
Yeah, that is true. You get UK is, but some people have the illusion that in the UK we're a bit smarter. We figured it out, you know, and it's like yes and no. We figured out that Christianity is not true. We've largely figured out that there's no God. Largely, I say, but spirituality, if you put that in quotes, which is a mixture of so many different beliefs, we have tons of them.
Yes,
and maybe there's something to be said about them being so segregated that you don't have this Christianity or non-religious. You have non-religious, but there's loads of different, they're almost like little cults or just like
I'm not sure I'd say cults. I think of them more like little social groups. So, you know, at uni, you have lots of different societies. It's almost like that. And, like, sometimes they hang out together.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say cult for, it doesn't matter. But I would say there's a cult-like element to them because they're religions. And
I would agree with that.
But I do know where you're going with the reference of them being like social clubs. Yeah, there's definitely a social aspect to it.
Yeah.
It honestly, coming to the US has really made me understand why some of my videos have had resonance so much in the US compared to the UK. And it's made me feel really quite fortunate to be enjoying the UK, basically the community, maybe not community, but definitely just the standard of the UK. It's just less divisive, and there's more room for conversation. And as Rachel was saying, when you meet someone, you assume they're an atheist because that is literally, I guess we have figured that out, most of us.
One of the big things that really opened my eyes was at Faithless Forum. Eric did this amazing activity where he got people to, like, stand up and sit down based on their experiences. And it's just kind of showing, you know, how much some people have in common and, you know, the differences between us and that kind of stuff. And literally throughout all of it, me and Steve were just, like, sat down together being like, we've gone through none of this. We can't even begin to understand what it's like.
And we were both just looking at each other going, this is church?
Because that's true.
Because it was an emphasis on community and just never seen it. And that's another thing. Lots of religious people in the UK, they don't go to church. There is not that aspect. But just before you go on, Eric, as you were speaking about, wonderful guy. He does talk heathen, which I've got here. You should check him out. Thomas will also leave a link to that.
During that activity, as people were standing up and sitting down, I found myself standing more often than I was sitting. And it's largely because I come from a very evangelical background where we did take the Bible literally and we did believe in the young earth creationist narrative. And so as a result of that, I found myself standing up when they said, you know, did you at one point believe in miracles? Did you believe that prayer can be answered? Did you believe that you're going to burn in hell for all eternity? Did you read your Bible every single morning? And every single one of those, I'm standing up. And I got to the point where I think for you guys, you're sitting there and you're like, oh, this activity, it's like fun, la la la. And I'm like sitting there like, man, this is a workout. Like I'm getting my thigh exercises in. And
I think for me, it really kind of like brought home the fact of like, these are the people that I'm making videos for, like to help people like this that don't necessarily have the voice that I do at the moment. Like they can do.
So if it's an issue that you never really went through yourself, but you're staring from the outside in, obviously you can still speak to the issue because you can see it from the outside.
Like, I obviously can't even begin to understand it.
But since you don't have the, I guess in my case, I have the fire of like, I'm pissed off that the first, 23, 24 years of my life, I believed this stuff and I was taught this stuff by people who I trusted and who I loved. From your perspective, though, or both of your perspectives, it sounds like you're coming at it from a position of you see it from a more rational side of the fence, and you're like, oh my God, how are these people affecting the rest of the world by, say, pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords, doing it from this religious dominionist perspective? People who are making decisions that affect more than just the United States, as well as affecting your American friends here. Would you say that that's a fair interpretation?
So what specifically that it's affected things politically? Or
I guess what lights a fire under your belly? Is it you see it and you think that it's just maddening, or is it more just a kind of a weird anomaly that just you find fascinating to observe from afar?
I've got a feeling me and Rachel might have a different answer. It's up to you if you'd like to go first.
No, you go ahead.
For me, I got into this because I just want to know the truth. And there wasn't this stigma, and it's not this fire of me backlashing because people have forced me to believe things that are not true or anything like that. It's just more, I just want to know the truth. And I've got to this situation where largely people in the UK will be like, here's your answer, here's your answer, here's your answer, until you get to something where they don't know the answer and they'll just pretend they've got one. Or they say, shut up. And I'd keep going and I'd keep going, and I'd find that the religious people, the religious authorities had nowhere near the answers. There's a story about how I basically became an atheist at the age of 8, and it was because the religious authority couldn't answer my question related to the problem of evil. So for me, I've just been getting into it because I'm interested in truth, and what I've learned is that ignorance kills. Yeah. So when people don't have the truth, they do things that are reprehensible, and the best cure to such basically devastation is to make sure that people are making informed decisions, and at the very least they're not claiming jurisdiction over the experience of other people based on bad reasoning. And that's where I'm getting my fire from, because I'm realizing that if you want an example of people doing bad things when they are actually really good people, it's because they're convinced by faith. It's because they're convinced by this religiosity. It literally, as Hitchens would put it, it's poisoning them in their core. And that's where I get my fire from. It's like, I want to help these people because I know that they mean well. And I know that they're kind. There's a few exceptions, but most of them are really kind. And you just got to get through to them with reason, rationality, logic, and evidence. Yeah. So that's for me.
The rationality part definitely rules. Rachel, what would you say lights a fire under your belly?
So I guess, like, before I started YouTube stuff, it was a very different reason why I started to kind of like look into the reasons people have for kind of like being an atheist or believing in God and that sort of stuff. It started off more like a morbid fascination, in the same way I have a fascination with things like true crime. It's like you see cases of like suffering, or you see things you don't understand, and you want to learn more about them and be like, well, why do people think this way? Why do people act this way? And so I wanted to look into that. And the more I kind of read about it and the more I found out, the more I started to see the harm that religion was doing in places. People who are very intelligent and very smart and very kind people were doing all sorts of crazy stuff, like Steve says, in the name of religion, and not just in the UK. You know, you have people being killed for being gay in the name of religion. You have people literally having their genitals sliced off in the name of religion. And, okay, maybe not off, but you know, I mean, like mutilated.
Like female genital mutilation.
Exactly, yeah.
Also male. You guys need to pack that shit in.
Yeah. The more I kind of saw of other people being hurt by religion and other people harming people in the name of religion, the more it just broke my heart. And I was like, I can't just stand by and watch this happen. I want to talk about it. So,
yeah. That's really good. As far as other things that you've noticed, other differences between the United States and the UK, Steve, what would you say or would be like kind of a third thing that stood out to you?
It really is like the toxicity of things. I feel like I have weights on my shoulders here, and it's because it's so easy to offend people. And offense in the UK, offense means you're offended. Get over it. It's nothing more than a whine. Yeah. There are a few exceptions, and there's an increase in unfortunate political situations, but really, you can say what you want. Here, it's you say something wrong, it's going to be really sillily, in my opinion. It's going to cause a divisive situation. And that very much is resonant. It's resonant in all areas. I've seen it already where I'm seeing lots of people, which are smart, basically what they're doing is taking the Republicans and saying that they're demons and that they're bad people. And I'm like, what are you doing? This is incredibly divisive. And I've seen it the other way around. And when it comes to the religion situation, I'm not seeing it from atheists here. They're cool. They're concerned. A lot of people I've met they're just concerned and they're upset that their religious family are poisoned by this. But I'm seeing the opposite from the other side, and that is that you're a heretic and we don't want to know you and you're nasty. And I think this is where these billboards are coming from and all of these things here. It's just such a divisive situation, and it makes me feel incredibly lucky to have the culture that I have in the UK. And it honestly, though, it sparks many, many questions because you guys have separation of church and state and we don't.
But that's largely that's largely an older generational thing, and it's changing. Yeah. And the reason that I say that is because not only do now, according to a recent Pew poll, it's over 33% of millennials are no longer religiously affiliated at all, but also atheism is becoming normalized, and almost everyone knows atheists who are good, awesome, caring people. But we don't have, as millennials, we don't have the stigma that the previous generations were raised up with, associating atheists with, say, godless communists. And there was an active campaign to try to push back against the communists by labeling them as non-religious.
You don't get that in the UK, do you? It's like if no one very few people associate atheism with communism, and for good reason. They're not related. But you do. But
oftentimes, if you say, well, we can have a great moral framework as atheists, which those things are completely separate issues. Whether or not you believe in God or which moral framework you adhere to are independent issues. And yet, oftentimes, you have people resort immediately to, well, Stalin was an atheist.
Yes.
And it's this mind virus that they have, where this idea that somehow those two are completely linked and can't be severed.
Me and Alex gave a wonderful
it was all right, I guess.
It was all right. It was all right? Okay, cool. I thought it was good.
Passable.
But we gave a speech at the Faithless Forum where we were speaking about objective morality, which we both now agree on, which is cool. We got a few divergences. And when I asked the audience to put their hands up if they believed morality was subjective, it was half. And the reason I bring this up is it illustrates your point that you have a room full of non-religious people, and half of them they're completely divided, so they're not associated. Like another one was veganism. It's about half and half, it seems, like from what I've gathered from talking to people. And I also think politically, while more atheists are certainly Democrat, left, etc., there was still plenty that are either centre or right, and that's cool. That's awesome. They're not together. They're not. It's not a thing.
We should be able to separate out a belief in a deity from someone's economic ideas and positions, from someone's political positions, from someone's moral positions.
That's definitely common in the UK as well.
Yeah, it is.
And then, then we can actually start having a productive conversation because it's based off of science and it's not linked to the dogmatic position that we're brought up with under religion.
I think the best thing about the UK, when it comes to religiosity, is the fact that most religious people are liberal. Lots of them just don't want to claim jurisdiction over your experience. And that's why it isn't a massive issue. It's like, they're religious. I may have a conversation with them over a pint and try and talk about why they're religious and maybe try and, show where they're wrong, or perhaps find out something they're right on that I'm wrong on, But largely, it doesn't come up, and it doesn't need to. Yeah. And that's the key thing here. It doesn't need to, because it doesn't leak through into everyday life.
You only kind of really talk about it when you want to.
Yeah.
So, you can go to the pub and, have a pint with your friends and talk about some big issues. And you can talk about, politics or Brexit or social issues. And it never, or it doesn't have to come back to religion at all.
Yeah,
I don't think religion ever comes into it. Okay, so politically, me and you are opposed in some way, Steve, because you voted leave with Brexit, I voted remain.
Yeah.
We can have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
Religion's not even going to come into that. No. And it shouldn't.
It shouldn't come into it. It's just it's a political difference. Done. Yeah. And also, on that topic,
didn't you get a lot of people angry at you for voting leave because they're like, you're an atheist, you should be smarter than this?
I did get it. I got it. I got it a lot. And
so
also,
ridiculous.
I think the reason how I can say that this is really, I think the UK, when it comes to politics, is incredibly divisive.
Oh, completely,
I would say as divisive as what you have with religion.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. I've been disowned by people because they're like, you voted away. They would. It can't be. This is a complex issue that is about sovereignty and economics, etc. And people are going to fall in different areas depending on their values. It has to be, you voted against us or not for my thing. You are irrational. I hate you. I'm unsubbing. I'm subbing just to unsub. And not everyone's that way, but there is a massive amount like that.
Very tribalistic.
Very, very tribalistic. This is something I would like to say to such people. You think that you've outgrown religion? Damn well you have not.
Just replaced it with something else.
Tribalism is still with you.
Yeah. Now, the first time I introduced like a boy I was dating to my family, first thing my brother said to me is he conservative? And I was like,
does it matter?
I don't know. I've not asked him what he votes. He's like, not having a conservative in my house. I'm like, you're my brother. You don't get to say who I date and who I can like bring around and stuff. Well, he does get to say who I can bring around, but you know what I mean? I was like, this is ridiculous. And I think it's very similar to how a lot of people here think about religions. If you're not part of their
that's
group.
a great example. It's like you just switch that with, is he an atheist? He's not coming round.
Exactly.
So if you think you've outgrown it and you think that way, think again.
And I see that though all the time in the United States. There were people at the Faithless Forum who literally had those experiences and were either on panels talking about it or were in the audience and said, yes, I lost my family. I was shunned. I was kicked out of the house. There was a question that during Eric's thing where he asked, how many of you have been kicked out of the home by
That
your
was
family members
heartbreaking.
because you became an atheist?
The
And there
number
was
of
the
people who
number
stood
of
up.
people who stood up was to me quite shocking.
To me, it's devastating.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like, the rational side of me is like, things have really been divisive in this situation here. The emotional side was, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, just
The
what the
thing
hell?
is, though, we aren't immune to that in the UK
We're not
because
immune, no.
that nearly happened to one of my friends who grew up in a family of Jehovah's Witnesses. And she wanted to go away to university. She wanted to study what she wanted to study. And they said to her, if you do that, we'll kick you out.
I think something that me and Rachel
That
should make
happens in
clear.
Islam a lot as well.
Yeah.
Oh, Islam
The
is
ex-Muslim
huge.
community.
But one thing that we should make clear is that despite the fact, yes, when it comes to religiosity, and hopefully we are making this clear, the UK is in a much better situation than the US. And I mean much better.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean it's perfect.
The UK still has massive problems. And as I said, the tribalism is still there. It just manifests in different ways. Overall, though, people are less divisive. And it's hard to pinpoint why.
Now, I mentioned Islam briefly when you talked about how your friend who was a Jehovah's Witness almost got, or was kicked out. Was kicked out or almost kicked out?
No, she had to give up on her education.
Oh, wow.
And she did get to go to a university, but it was the one that her family picked. And she did get to study, but it was the course that her family picked. And she's now married to some guy many years older than her that her family picked.
One thing I've seen in the UK, especially in the news, I don't know how prevalent it is, because a lot of times when I travel through the UK, I don't necessarily go to these communities. I normally will either be in the airport or I'll go to areas that are a little bit more, sightseeing and touristy and stuff. Yeah. But I tend to see a lot of things about Islam. And so I wanted to ask you guys, in the US,
is a divisive topic, I think.
The Muslim population is, I want to say, around 1% in the US. It's very, very small.
Yeah.
And because of that, we don't really see it as much here in the US as you guys do, especially after the refugee crisis of the last couple of years. But how is that affecting this religious divide in the UK, where you're saying on the one hand, it's okay to just be an atheist. Everyone just kind of accepts that you're not religious. It's not really an issue. But what I've seen is in the ex-Muslim community, especially in Europe, especially in places like the UK, if you're an ex-Muslim, your life can be in danger in certain communities, especially to your family if honor killing is an issue, especially in areas where they're trying to implement Sharia law.
I'm not sure it's quite so much ex-Muslims that have the problem, but I think Muslims have the problem. There are certain parts of Yorkshire where I grew up where you will be demonized if you're a Muslim. It's in the same way that atheism is demonized here. I've seen Muslims treated that way.
You won't get many. I don't think there's many killings because there is a refuge. Like if you leave, you'll lose your family and you'll be ostracized in many examples, or more often than not. But there's a massive amount of atheism in the UK, and there's a massive amount of people that will just accept them with open arms and go, we're your new family now, So they do have that, whereas they don't have that in, say, the Middle East.
Yeah.
So obviously it's much better than the Middle East. I did a video, Save Amna, which was about a woman in Saudi Arabia who was trying to flee the country to avoid being, I believe it was a forced marriage that she was being pushed into. And we
accepted her, didn't we?
No, this was Amna. She never made it out.
Oh my gosh.
And as far as I know, last I heard, she was put, basically, they have what's the equivalent of a prison system for women who won't adhere to the male guardianship system. And it's horrific. And so obviously in the UK, it's not nearly that bad, but you have in the West, you have people like Yasmin Mohammed, who grew up in Canada, and yet she was being forced into an arranged marriage with Osama bin Laden's right-hand man, and she had a serious amount of oppression, sexist oppression, misogynistic oppression towards her because of the mandates of her faith. And these are things that you can find based in the Quran and the Hadith.
It's not just women being forced into... Sorry, it's not just women being forced into forced marriage. The men are as well. I have a friend I went to university with who's from Yemen, and he's the loveliest guy. He's amazing. He's one of my best friends in the world. And he is being made to marry a woman that he doesn't want to marry. Yeah. You can't... I mean, obviously women are the victims a lot of the time in Islam and stuff, but the men are just as much, I think. I think we forget about that because we see the men as the oppressors, and it's not necessarily a male-female issue. It's the older generations oppressing the younger ones because they don't want them to leave.
No, I completely agree with that. And what I've seen, though, in working with organizations like, or not working so much with, but talking with people from ex-Muslims of North America, ex-Muslims of Great Britain, Atheist Republic, where they have a large percentage of their constituents are ex-Muslims. What I've found is that their stories, so often it doesn't matter what country it's in, even in the United States, even in the UK and the rest of Europe, is that if they come from a very conservative or even a moderately conservative Muslim background, a lot of times they are treated very, very differently for becoming atheists. And so I'm kind of curious as to how much of these stories of, someone walked through a predominantly Muslim neighborhood without a head covering on and they were, attacked or harassed or something.
You will get social elements. That's one thing I will say.
Is that right-wing fear-mongering, or are these things that you actually genuinely feel...
Absolutely not.
Like maybe for your safety if you're...
So I don't know. I can't really say that I know many, like, purely Muslim areas, but I'm sure there are some.
So I lived in Southampton.
Yeah.
And Southampton's a nice place. I lived in a place called St Mary's. And the population was vastly people from... It was mainly made from Muslims, and it was from people that had immigrated from different areas in Europe. And in certain places, the signs were first and foremost in Arabic.
Really?
Then in Polish.
Wow.
Then in English. Which
but we get that.
That's just a cultural thing.
But we get that in the United States too, in places like Chinatown. You'll go to somewhere in like San Francisco or something, and the signs will be in Chinese because they have these pockets, immigrant pockets. But I don't really feel like if I were to walk down the street in Chinatown that I'm going to be, my personal safety is going to be in danger if I don't follow certain Chinese customs.
You're not going to be in danger, kind of thing. It's just what I'm getting at is that the community is predominantly Muslim in those areas. So being ostracized, I should have made this more clear, apologies. Being ostracized is going to be not just your family, it will be the community, because the community is largely made from people that are of the same religious faith, if that makes sense. So rather than, my family doesn't accept me anymore, or I'm having issues here, it's okay, I have friends in the neighborhood and I can find refuge in the schools and stuff like that. That's not the case anymore. Like, they have to actually go, I'm moving. Now, they don't have to move far, but that's what I was trying to illustrate.
That's such a shame.
That is a thing. And
I do think the UK's kind of like social care is a lot better though, especially for people in those situations. Like, the benefits we give people, the housing we give people who are struggling economically or financially, whatever, or because they've been kicked out by their families, there's a lot more support for them, which is why I think a lot more people would be willing to leave than say in America.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, we've touched on some of the differences, some of the ways that in the US maybe we still have some catch up to do. But there's one final thing that I wanted to touch on in terms of what you see us doing right and what you see us doing well. And you noticed something about community. Do you want to speak to that a little first, Rachel?
No, you go ahead, Steve.
You sure?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. You guys have got community just down to a T. Yeah. It's honestly, your community is so strong here, and I know it's particularly strong here because you have the atheist experience, and you have, it's really a heart, if you will. It's so strong that before getting here, I didn't know what
Well,
community is.
You said the atheist experience, specifically the atheist community of Austin.
Yes, sorry.
Which
sorry.
includes,
Yeah.
Talk Heathen, and it includes...
Yes, no, that is something that should be
Truth
stressed as well.
Wanted, and
The
there's
reason,
like 10 shows that...
absolutely. The reason I say the atheist experience is probably I've fallen for what many people do, and that is that it's the main show that got me into it, and it's still the most prominent show, if I'm not mistaken.
It's still the biggest show.
Yeah, there is a whole community, and there's like like you said, there's how many? 10?
It's about 10. They
there's
have
10?
Parenting Beyond Belief, Secular Sexuality, Truth Wanted, Talk Heathen, Atheist Experience, Atheist Vanguard. I'm missing a few, but there's
but there's many. It's the community, the whole community as a whole, and it's really incredible.
Yeah.
Honestly, I did not know what I was missing until I saw it, and now I'm going to be coming back more often than not.
Yeah. I had no idea what to expect yesterday when you first took us to the ACA, and I found it so overwhelming. Like the sheer number of people there, like how they all wanted to talk to everyone and everyone wanted to be involved with everything. I was like, it kind of like kicked my social anxiety in a bit, and I had to go sit outside for a while, but that was a problem with me, not the community.
Well, also they need a bigger building.
Oh my God, I know. So we saw like the Talk Heathen. I couldn't even think of the word. So we saw Talk Heathen being recorded and the Atheist Experience that Steve was on, and he's got the mug.
Steve was on both.
No, I wasn't on Talk Heathen.
Next week.
We're doing that next week.
Me and Rachel.
Or is that supposed to be a surprise?
It doesn't matter. It's not. It's not anymore.
No, we saw it being recorded, and just the sheer number of people who were squished into this tiny little room watching it, they were so engaged and they were loving it, and it was amazing to see. And like I say, it was a little too crowded for me, but that was my problem. Nothing to do with the community. It was amazing to see everyone come together like that and just enjoy themselves so much.
It'd be really interesting to learn if the UK has more social anxiety. Simply because of the fact that we don't have those kind of close communities outside of church, which not many people do. But then again, maybe not. I don't know. But it would be quite interesting to know.
I'm not sure.
I've seen, while the ACA does it quite well in terms of community, and because they have that building and that location that people can come together, the US is huge. And there are atheist communities that have been popping up left and right, but this movement, this new wave of atheism is relatively new. So like what you saw with Faithless Forum, we had one of probably the youngest demographic.
It was very young.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Any atheist conference or convention that I've ever been to, and I've gone to a ton of them.
One of the things I enjoyed was we actually had like kids and teenagers in the audience, and there were these amazing young people, like so full of like questions and ideas. And I think like fostering that kind of critical mind in such a young generation and making them excited to learn is just such an important thing.
Yeah, and I think by making it entertaining and by adding science and by adding things that are just fun and
doing
cool
all the silly
and games
stuff
and stuff, and that we're able to bring in that audience. But that's a relatively new thing. And that's something that really we're just starting to reach a critical mass where that type of movement can really spread, because for a while it's been kind of the older generation that they see the harm that's being done and they're like, well, I'll go down and I'll join some small club or something, and all the young people, they have energy, but they don't necessarily have the same passion in this cause if they haven't been raised in a super religious household. And that's something that we're hoping to provide to people, to give them this community that they can join, especially for those who, you saw how many people had been kicked out of their homes and how many people have been raised in horribly religious backgrounds and stuff. And so for those people, they are wanting the community, they desperately need it, they want it. And I think that if anywhere needs it, it's the Bible Belt.
I think where this movement could really have its success is my girlfriend Hannah. She's not entirely interested in atheism. She's figured out there's no God, but it's just she's not philosophical. She's not interested in these things. But she particularly loved being at the Faithless Forum. And the reason for that is partly the community, partly the way in which there was a diverse amount of content, that there was humor, that it was a good laugh. I think one thing that religion does very well, and I think anyone that says this isn't the case, they're wrong. While it's a failed science, it is a very successful community.
Yes.
And it's very successful at dealing with emotional dread, even if it does so superficially because it's not true.
Yeah.
And I think that having those voids filled has always been what the atheist community, or more accurately, the non-religious community, has needed to fill. We need to fill it as humans. And I think that while we're now getting rid of religion and we're finally figuring out we need to fill these voids, I think we're going to see a similar process to how when we went from astrology to astronomy, it wasn't just, now we just look at it a different way. It was you had to really break down different ways in which you think about the topic and different ways in which certain things need to be fulfilled. It's not a perfect analogy, but...
Could you tell from the Faithless Forum that I had a background as a youth pastor and church camp counselor?
It's the charisma and energy you have on stage.
Yeah, you made me feel like I don't even know the definition of charisma. So you're on it. You're strong there, my friend.
Well, do you have something else?
Well, I was just going to say, I think what's very interesting in the UK is, so way back in the day when I was at sixth form, I did this project about, it was comparing how people like view religions and how they get kind of fanatical about religions and almost like cult-like behavior in some cases, and comparing that to other aspects of UK life. And so one of the comparisons was with football fans. And it was like very, very interesting to see people, getting kind of like passionate and, getting behind their teams and that sort of stuff and getting like almost religious about their love of football. Do you think the UK has done a better job? This is kind of like me asking Steve, because you've got experience there as well. Do you think the UK has done a better job of replacing religion with other things that people can act religiously about, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
Like football, like maybe music.
Yeah. And I don't know how we achieved it, because I don't know the history, but yeah. For example, I play table tennis. There's a really cool community there.
Yeah.
Ironically, a lot of them are religious, but there's no religiosity involved. It never comes up, and so it's just, this is an example of what Rachel was mentioning earlier. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, they're religious, I'm not. It's just not a thing. And but what we bond over is we play table tennis. We'll have a pint or two. We'll have a good laugh.
Yeah.
Like, we've replaced it with things like that. There's gaming communities. I play games and stuff.
I have an
But
amazing...
the US has every one of those things as well, where there'll be very, very tight-knit communities that do that on a regular, sometimes, multiple times a week basis.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've got like an amazing community of friends in London, and we're all kind of like self-employed creatives. So lots of musicians, a couple of filmmakers. I'm the only YouTuber at the minute, I think. But we all like get together once a month and we talk about mostly it's kind of like work stuff, to be honest. And we talk about like different opportunities we've all found. We network. We like help each other out with stuff. I gave like a little talk the other day about kind of getting started on YouTube and things that you should do, and afterwards we all kind of like get together and drink a lot of wine and eat a lot of food, and it's amazing. But the fact is, finding those kind of like big shared things and like bringing everyone together that way, I guess means we don't need religion because there's no void to fill. A lot of people ask me like, well, don't you feel like you're missing out on this or this or this? I'm like, I've never had a void in my life that only religion could fill. Yeah. When I feel lonely, I make new friends. When I feel scared,
it's not the superstition and bullshit void?
It's not.
How's all those crystal healing going for you?
Pretty good.
That's sarcasm, by the way. She does not do that.
Yes, I do.
Well, I want to thank you guys for coming on the show. This has been fantastic. I'm really, really glad. Like, this is actually the very first time that I've been able to meet Steve and Rachel in person. So having them out to the Faithless Forum, getting to have all the other speakers as well, has just been a huge, huge honor. I'm going to be also doing a talk with a couple other speakers, but I'll let that be a surprise. So we'll see. But Rachel, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much as well.
Thanks.
And I'll see you guys hopefully very soon in a Here and How episode. We've been talking about changing the format up a little bit.
Yes.
There's been a lot going on behind the scenes with us discussing stuff, hasn't there? And I think it could be very exciting. It would be good to try and do an episode while we're here, maybe?
Yep, absolutely.
Live in studio, get the dynamic.
Live in studio.
Although I think if I do that, I'm probably going to scoot the chair back at the beginning of the video. I was worried that this cable was going to come out, but I found myself sitting here going...
Yeah, I had to pretend I was seeing Rachel, but I'm looking through your head.
Yeah, I really enjoyed seeing the back of your head, to be honest. It's an improvement on Steve's face.
He's bold on the back of the head. Like, there's no...
Are you?
Yeah, completely. You don't know it. You've never seen it.
Shut up.
He also is not wearing any trousers.
That is true.
You should fix that.
Yeah.
My secret identity is actually I'm really Matt Dillahunty.
Oh.
Very
You
cool.
just spin the head round.
The front part.
Yeah.
It just twist it around.
Why am I thinking of the first Harry Potter film? You know?
Just on the back, it's Matt. It's a magic trick. But on that note, I want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in and watching. It's been apparent to me that no matter where you go in the world, religion exists. Religion can be problematic, but it doesn't always have to be. And we can find ourselves pushing towards a world that is less based in dogma, more focused on positive community that doesn't utilize these kind of cult-like tactics or these superstitious tactics, and where non-religion is just kind of an everyday thing. And that's where we're headed. That's the direction that we're pushing in, and I'm really looking forward to taking you guys on that journey with me, and hopefully we'll be there soon here in the United States. Thank you guys both for joining, and everybody, don't drink the Kool-Aid. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please go check out Rachel Oates and Rationality Rules on YouTube. They both make some absolutely fantastic content. We also have a podcast together called the Here and How Podcast, which you can watch on YouTube or any podcasting app. If you support my work on Patreon, thank you so much. And if you would like to support my work promoting science, free thought, and critical thinking, you can go to patreon.com/holykoolaid. Until next time, my fellow apes. Until next time.